My name is Henry, a 32-year-old software engineer from Boston with a painfully average life. At least that was true until last Tuesday, when I checked my Powerball ticket and nearly collapsed. $47 million. Just like that, everything changed. But instead of shouting it from the rooftops, I made a decision that would test the character of everyone in my life. I pretended to lose my job and needed help. What I discovered about human nature would change me forever. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever wondered who would truly be there for you when money is gone and times get tough. Before that fateful Tuesday, my life was the definition of ordinary. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment in South Boston, nothing fancy, just enough space for me and my collection of vintage video games. The rent was reasonable by Boston standards, which means it was still outrageously expensive. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door from a parking lot incident 3 years ago. I never bothered to fix it, since it seemed like a waste of money, when the car still ran perfectly fine. My job at Nexus Technologies paid enough to cover my expenses with a little left over for my modest hobbies. But I certainly was not living large. I worked 60-hour weeks, developing software for banking systems. It was tedious work with little recognition, but the stability had always been enough for me. My cubicle was decorated with exactly 3 items: a Boston Red Sox calendar, a small cactus named Spike that required minimal attention, and a photo of my college graduation with my grandmother Martha. My family situation was complicated. My parents divorced when I was 14, a messy split that left emotional shrapnel that we still felt nearly 20 years later. My mother Barbara lived in Hartford, Connecticut, working as a real estate agent. Our relationship was cordial but distant. She remarried when I was in college to a financial advisor named Paul, who always looked at me like I was an underperforming investment. My father Robert moved to Florida after the divorce, partly for a job opportunity selling yacht insurance, but mostly to get away from my mother. We spoke on holidays and birthdays, conversations that rarely went deeper than sports scores and weather reports. I visited him once a year out of obligation trips that always ended with a sense of relief when I boarded the plane home. My younger sister Natalie was 28 and lived in Chicago, working as a marketing executive for a cosmetics company. She was always the ambitious one, constantly posting on social media about her career achievements and exotic vacations. We had been close as children, building blanket forts and creating elaborate imaginary worlds, but adulthood had turned us into occasional text message correspondents who exchanged generic birthday gifts. My older brother Gregory, 36, was the golden child of the family. He started a successful property development company in Atlanta, drove a Tesla, and lived in a house featured in an architectural magazine. He never missed an opportunity to mention his accomplishments or offer unsolicited advice about how I should be more ambitious. Our conversations inevitably left me feeling inadequate. The only family member I truly connected with was my grandmother Martha, my father's mother. At 76, she lived alone in a small apartment in Cambridge after my grandfather passed away 5 years ago. Despite her modest pension and occasional health problems, she never complained. Every Sunday I drove the 20 minutes to have dinner with her, bringing takeout and listening to her stories about her youth. She always sent me home with leftovers she had prepared, despite my protests that she should keep them for herself. My friend circle was small, but had always seemed sufficient. Marcus was my roommate in college, a charismatic guy who now worked in pharmaceutical sales. We met up for beers every couple of weeks, conversations dominated by his dating exploits and sales targets. I considered him my best friend, though I sometimes wondered if the feeling was mutual. Jessica was a colleague from work, the only person in the office who appreciated my dry humor. We often grabbed lunch together and complained about our micromanaging boss. I thought we had a solid friendship built on mutual workplace survival. Then there was Rachel, perhaps the most complicated relationship in my life. We dated for 2 years after meeting at a friend's wedding. The relationship ended amicably when she got accepted to a graduate program in New Hampshire. We decided long distance would be too difficult, but remained friends. She moved back to Boston 8 months ago after completing her degree, and we occasionally met for coffee conversations that were comfortable but tinged with what might have been. My financial situation before the lottery win was stable but uninspiring. I had about $8,000 in savings, a 401 Kelvin, that was growing slower than I would like, $22,000 in student loan debt, and a credit card balance that hovered around $4,000. I was not drowning, but I certainly was not swimming freely either. The lottery ticket was a weekly indulgence, a $5 fantasy I allowed myself every Friday on my way home from work. I never expected to win anything substantial. It was just a moment of possibility, a brief escape from the predictability of my life. I would stop at the same convenience store, exchange pleasantries with Arjun, the owner, who knew me by name, and pick my numbers. Always the same ones: 7, 16, 23, 28, 34, and 42. My birthday, my parents' birthdays, and the number of my childhood home. My neighbors in the apartment building were familiar strangers. I exchanged nods with Mr. Abernathy from apartment 3C when we collected our mail, occasionally helped Mrs. Rodriguez from 2 Ampere carry her groceries up the stairs, and politely avoided eye contact with the loud couple in 4B who argued at all hours. It was a community in the loosest sense of the word, connected by proximity rather than genuine bonds. I volunteered once a month at a local food bank, more out of a sense of obligation than passion. It was something to put on my dating profile, a fact I was not proud to admit, even to myself. My coworkers saw me as reliable but unremarkable. I was invited to happy hours but rarely to weddings. I was the person people were glad to see, but did not go out of their way to include. This was my life before everything changed, a life that was not unhappy, but not particularly fulfilling either. I had accepted this mediocrity as my reality, never imagining that a $5 ticket purchased on a Friday evening would completely upend everything I thought I knew about myself and the people around me. The evening I discovered I won the lottery started like any other Tuesday. I had ordered Thai food, the same green curry I got every week, and was halfway through an episode of a crime documentary when I remembered the lottery drawing had been that night. I pulled out my phone and checked the numbers without much expectation. It was a ritual, more than anything else a moment of fantasy before returning to reality. 7. My birthday. A match. 16. My mother's birthday. Another match. As I continued checking the numbers, my heart began to race. 23, 28, 34, 42, all matches. I stood up so quickly I knocked over my curry, barely noticing as the sauce seeped into my carpet. I checked the numbers again. And again. I pulled up 3 different lottery websites to confirm. Each one showed the same results. I had won $47 million. The room seemed to tilt. I sat down on the floor, my back against the couch, unable to process what was happening. I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my throat. This had to be a mistake. People like me did not win the lottery. I was the guy who found a $20 bill in an old coat pocket and considered it the highlight of his month. I could not sleep that night. I paced my apartment, the lottery ticket clutched in my hand. I was afraid to put it down. What if there was a fire? A break-in? What if it somehow disappeared? I eventually placed it in a plastic bag and put it inside a book, which I then put inside another book and hid both under my mattress. I still could not sleep. At 3 in the morning, I moved the ticket to the freezer inside an empty ice cream container. Then I sat on my couch until dawn, guarding my refrigerator like it contained the nuclear codes. By morning, exhaustion had given way to anxiety. I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years and spent the day researching what happens when you win the lottery. The stories I found were not encouraging. There was the man in Florida who won $30 million and was bankrupt within 5 years, abandoned by friends who had borrowed money and never repaid it. The woman in Texas, whose own children sued her over their perceived share of her winnings. The countless tales of lottery winners whose lives were ruined by sudden wealth, targeted by scammers, harassed by strangers, betrayed by loved ones. One article particularly caught my attention. It described how a financial advisor suggested that lottery winners keep their windfall secret for as long as possible, even from family. The moment people know you have money, the article warned, your relationships change forever. You stop being Henry the person and become Henry the $47 million resource. This idea took root in my mind. What if I did not tell anyone? What if instead I used this as an opportunity to see who in my life valued me for me, not for what I could give them? The more I thought about it, the more the idea appealed to me. It would be a test. Yes, but also a protection mechanism. Before I told anyone about my newfound wealth, I wanted to know who deserved to be in my new life. The next day, I contacted a lawyer specializing in lottery winners. Janet Kim worked from a modest office downtown, her walls lined with diplomas and certificates. I made her promise complete confidentiality before I showed her the ticket. "Congratulations," she said, without much enthusiasm after verifying the numbers. "Now the real work begins." Over the next 2 weeks, Janet helped me navigate the complex process of claiming my winnings. I opted for the lump sum payment rather than the annuity, which reduced the amount to $27 million. After taxes, I would take home approximately $16 million. Still an unfathomable sum to someone who had been excited about a 5% raise 6 months ago. Janet connected me with a financial advisor, Stephen Wells, who helped me establish a blind trust to claim the winnings anonymously. Massachusetts was one of the states that allowed lottery winners to remain private, a fact I was immensely grateful for. We set up numerous accounts, investments, and safeguards that I barely understood, but trusted were necessary. "What will you do now?" Stephen asked, after we had finalized the arrangements. "Buy a mansion. A yacht? Travel the world." "Actually," I said, "I am going to keep living exactly as I have been, at least for now." Both Janet and Stephen looked at me like I had suggested setting the money on fire, but neither tried to dissuade me. It was my money after all, my life-changing relationship testing, identity-shifting fortune. As I formulated my plan, I considered each person in my life carefully. My parents' siblings, grandmother, Marcus, Jessica, Rachel, my neighbors, and co-workers. How would each of them react if I came to them in need? Who would help me if they thought I had nothing to offer in return? I decided to start with a simple premise: I had lost my job due to company downsizing. It was believable enough, especially with the recent economic uncertainty. I would need to be careful, though. Too dramatic a story would seem suspicious. Too mild, and it would not test anyone's true character. The plan took shape in my mind. I would start with family, then move to friends. I would observe not just who offered help, but how they offered it. Was it grudging or genuine? Did they listen, or just wait for their turn to speak? Did they follow through, or just make empty promises? As I left Stephen's office with my new financial empire invisibly arranged behind me, I felt a strange mix of power and vulnerability. I now had more money than I could spend in a lifetime, yet I was about to willingly put myself in the position of asking for help. It was a bizarre contradiction, but one that I hoped would reveal important truths. That night, as I heated up leftover pasta in my microwave, still living as if nothing had changed, I made my final decision. I would go through with the test. I would discover who truly cared about me. Henry the person before Henry the millionaire made his debut. Little did I know how painful those discoveries would be. I began my experiment on a Sunday afternoon, starting with the weekly call to my mother. I had rehearsed what I would say, trying to sound appropriately distressed, but not melodramatic. As her face appeared on my phone screen, I noticed she was in her car, probably between house showings. "Hi, Mom," I said intentionally, making my voice sound tired. "Henry, I can only talk for a few minutes. I have a client meeting in 20 minutes, she replied, not looking at the camera, as she applied lipstick. "Actually, I have some bad news," I said. "I lost my job yesterday. Budget cuts. The whole department was let go." This got her attention. She looked directly at the camera, her expression more annoyed than concerned. "Oh, Henry, did you not see this coming? You should always be prepared for these things." No sympathy, no immediate offer of support, just criticism. "It was unexpected," I continued. "I am a bit worried about making rent next month while I job hunt." She sighed, the kind of deep put-upon sigh that had accompanied many of our conversations since childhood. "This is exactly why Paul always says you should have at least 6 months of living expenses saved. Do you not have any savings at all?" "Some," I admitted. "But with student loans and credit card payments, it will not last long." "Well," she said, "checking her watch, you will just have to cut back. Cancel subscriptions, eat at home, all those things. You are smart, you will figure it out. I really need to go now, but keep me updated on the job search. Try LinkedIn. That is how Natalie found her position. And just like that, the call was over. No offer of financial help, not even a genuine expression of sympathy, just some basic advice she had probably read in a magazine article about millennials and their spending habits. I sat looking at my phone for a long time afterward, a hollow feeling in my chest. I had not expected her to offer to pay my rent, but I had hoped for something. Anything that indicated she cared about my well-being beyond surface-level concern. Next was my father. I decided to call rather than video chat, knowing he rarely answered video calls anyway. He picked up on the fourth ring, the sounds of a golf course audible in the background. "Henry, how's it going, son?" His voice was cheerful, distracted. I repeated my story about losing my job. Unlike my mother, he at least made the appropriate sympathetic noises. "That's rough. Really rough. Companies these days have no loyalty, not like in my time." He launched into a story about corporate America that had little relevance to my situation. When he finally paused for breath, I gently steered the conversation back. "I am a bit concerned about staying afloat financially while I job hunt," I said. "Oh well, the job market is pretty good right now, isn't it? I am sure something will come up soon." He paused, and I heard him call out to someone about a tea time. "Listen, Henry, I would love to chat more, but we are about to start the back nine. Have you tried reaching out to your brother Gregory? Knows a lot of people in tech, I think." I assured him I would contact Gregory, and he promised to call me over the weekend to check in. I knew he would forget. He always did. My brother Gregory was next. I decided to text him first, knowing he rarely answered calls from family during work hours. "Hey Greg, lost my job yesterday. Wondering if you have any contacts in Boston tech I could reach out to." His response came 3 hours later. "Tough break. Not sure I know anyone in Boston specifically. Have you tried updating your resume?" I replied that I had and asked if he might be able to help out with a small loan until I found a new job. His response was swift and cutting. "I built my business from nothing, Henry. No handouts, no shortcuts. Maybe this is the push you need to finally start taking your career seriously. Time to stand on your own 2 feet like I did." I stared at the message, anger and hurt competing for dominance. Gregory had conveniently forgotten the $20,000 loan from our father that had helped launch his first development project. His no handouts narrative was a fiction he had created to make his success seem more impressive, and now he was using it to justify turning his back on his brother. My sister Natalie was slightly more sympathetic when I called her that evening. "Oh no, that is awful timing with the economy and everything," she said. I could hear her television in the background. "What are you going to do?" I explained my financial concerns, and she made appropriate noises of sympathy. "I wish I could help, Henry. I really do. But I just put a deposit down on a new apartment, and Chicago rent is insane. Plus, I am still paying off my own student loans." "I understand," I said. "Even a small loan would help just to cover next month's rent while I job hunt." "Let me think about it," she said, which I knew was her way of saying no without actually saying it. "Things are just so tight right now with the move and everything. Let me check my budget and get back to you." She never did get back to me. The real surprise came when I visited my grandmother Martha that Sunday. I had not planned to include her in my test, feeling it would be cruel to worry an elderly woman living on a fixed income. But as we sat eating the pot roast she had prepared, despite her arthritis making cooking painful, she noticed something was wrong. "You are quiet today, Henry," she said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. "What is troubling you?" I found I could not lie to her directly. I told her about losing my job, downplaying my concerns so as not to worry her. Her reaction was immediate and heartfelt. "Oh, my dear boy, I am so sorry. No criticism, no lectures about saving or networking or standing on my own feet. Just genuine compassion." Then she stood up, walked to the drawer where she kept her important papers, and returned with her checkbook. "Grandma, no," I protested, genuine alarm in my voice. "I did not tell you this for money." "I know that," she said firmly, "but I have my pension and my Social Security. I do not need much. I can spare $300 this month and the same next month if you still need it." I felt sick. $300 was probably a significant portion of her monthly income after rent and utilities. The fact that she would offer it without hesitation, when my own parents and siblings had offered nothing, made me want to end the charade immediately. "I cannot take your money," I insisted. "You can and you will," she said with the gentle firmness that had always been impossible to argue with. "Family helps family, Henry. That is what we do." I reluctantly accepted the check, promising myself that I would return the money tenfold once my experiment was over. As I helped her wash the dishes before leaving, she shared stories of how her parents had struggled during the Great Depression, how neighbors had helped each other survive. People show their true character in how they treat others when there is nothing to gain, she said, drying a plate with slow, careful movements. "Remember that, Henry." I did not know then how prophetic those words would prove to be. I also reached out to more distant relatives. My Aunt Alice sent a generic sorry to hear that text and immediately changed the subject to her upcoming cruise. Uncle Thomas promised to keep an ear out for opportunities but made no concrete offers of help. My cousin Brandon suggested I try delivering food for one of the app services, something he had done when things were tight but offered no other assistance. By the end of my family outreach, I felt a profound sense of disappointment and hurt. With the exception of my grandmother, whose generosity had moved me to tears on the drive home, my family had offered little beyond platitudes and superficial advice. The people who were supposed to care about me unconditionally had placed conditions on their support or withheld it entirely. As I sat in my apartment that night, the same apartment that I could now buy the entire building of if I wanted, I wondered what these revelations meant for my future relationships with my family. When they eventually learned of my wealth, would I be able to forget how they had turned away when I needed them, should I? These questions would only multiply as I expanded my test to include my friends. After the disappointing response from most of my family, I braced myself to extend the experiment to my friends and former co-workers. I decided to start with Marcus, my supposed best friend since college. I met him for our usual Thursday night beers at the Rusty Nail, a dive bar halfway between our apartments. I arrived first and ordered a cheap beer instead of my usual craft brew, a small detail to support my story. "Hey man, rough week?" Marcus asked, noticing my cheaper drink choice as he slid onto the bar stool beside me. "You could say that," I replied, then launched into my story about being laid off. I watched his face carefully as I spoke, noting how his expression shifted from surprise to what appeared to be genuine concern. "That is total garbage," he said when I finished. "After everything you have done for that company, they do not deserve you anyway." His initial response was encouraging, exactly what you would hope to hear from a friend. He asked appropriate questions about severance minimal, I told him, and my job prospects. It was only when I hesitantly brought up my financial concerns that his demeanor subtly changed. "Yeah, that is tough," he said suddenly, very interested in peeling the label off his beer bottle. "The job market is pretty good though, right? I am sure you will find something soon." "Probably," I agreed, "but I am worried about making rent next month while I search." "I hate to ask, but is there any chance you could loan me a bit to tide me over?" "Just until I land something new." Marcus shifted uncomfortably on his stool. "Man, I would if I could, you know that. But I just put a deposit down on that trip to Cancun for New Year's tea, and my commission check was lower than expected this quarter." He signaled the bartender for another round. "Let me get these drinks though." "Okay." As if a $15 beer could substitute for actual support when I supposedly needed it. Throughout the rest of the evening, Marcus steered the conversation away from my situation and toward his usual topics. His sales targets, the new girl in accounting, he was pursuing his gym routine. By the time we parted ways, he had not made a single concrete offer of help beyond picking up the tab. The next day, I texted him about a job lead I had found and asked if he would be willing to review my updated resume. He read the message, but did not respond. When I followed up 2 days later, he claimed to have been swamped at work, but would definitely look at it soon. He never did. Jessica, my work friend, initially seemed more promising. When I called to tell her about being laid off, she gasped appropriately. "Henry, that is awful. Are you okay? Did anyone else in your department get cut?" I explained that several of us had been let go, and she expressed outrage on our behalf. She even offered to meet for coffee the next day to strategize about my job search. I felt a flicker of hope that at least one friendship would prove genuine. That hope faded when I arrived at the coffee shop to find Jessica already there with Ryan. another colleague from Nexus Technologies. She had not mentioned she was bringing anyone else. "Hope you do not mind," she said brightly. "Ryan knows a lot about the job market right now." What followed was less a supportive conversation and more an information-gathering session. Jessica and Ryan peppered me with questions about the layoffs, who else had been affected, whether I thought more cuts were coming. It slowly dawned on me that they were not there to help me, but to assess whether their own jobs might be at risk. My financial concerns were brushed aside, my hints about needing assistance ignored. Worse, within days, I heard from another former colleague that Jessica was telling people I had been fired for performance issues, not laid off due to budget cuts. She had twisted my situation into office gossip, seemingly unconcerned about how it might affect my professional reputation. My interactions with other coworkers followed similar patterns. Bradley, my former manager, promised to put in a good word with his industry contacts, but never followed through. Alicia, who had often called me her work husband, suddenly had no time to meet up. Steve, who had borrowed $50 from me last month and never repaid it, stopped responding to my texts entirely. I was beginning to think that my entire social circle was built on convenience, rather than genuine connection, when I finally reached out to Rachel, my ex-girlfriend. We had planned to meet for our monthly coffee catch-up anyway, so I decided to use that opportunity to share my news. We met at a small cafe near the public garden, a place we had frequented when we were dating. Rachel arrived 5 minutes early, as she always did already, having ordered my usual Americano. The familiar gesture touched me more than I expected. "You look tired," she said, as I sat down, her tone concerned, rather than accusatory. "Everything okay?" I told her about losing my job, trying to maintain the same level of distress I had shown to others. Her reaction was immediately different. "I am so sorry, Henry," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "That must be really stressful. How are you holding up, really?" The question, so simple, yet so genuine, caught me off guard. Everyone else had asked about the job, the layoffs, my plans. Rachel was the first person to ask about me, about how I was feeling. "Honestly, not great," I admitted. "I am worried about making rent, keeping up with student loan payments. It all feels a bit overwhelming." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "What do you need right now? Not what you think you should need, or what others think you need. What would actually help you in this moment?" Again, I was struck by the sincerity of her question. She wasn't offering generic platitudes or one-size-fits-all advice. She was actually listening. "I need time to find the right next job, not just jump at the first offer," I said. "But that means I need a financial cushion I don't have." Without hesitation, Rachel reached for her purse. "I got a bonus last month. Not huge, but enough to help. I can loan you $2,000 interest-free, no rush to pay it back." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. $2,000 was a significant amount of money for someone in her position. She was a social worker at a nonprofit, hardly a lucrative career. "Rachel, I cannot accept that," I said. "Yes, you can," she insisted, already writing a check. "Remember when I was in grad school and my car broke down? You paid for the repairs, no questions asked. Friends help each other, Henry. That is what we do." As she handed me the check, she also offered practical assistance. She knew someone in HR at a tech company that might be hiring. She offered to review my resume and practice interview questions. She suggested affordable health insurance options, since I would lose my coverage. But most importantly, she listened. She let me express my fears without judgment, offered encouragement without minimizing my concerns, and made me feel valued as a person during a time when I supposedly had little to offer in return. After coffee, she texted me links to job boards specializing in software engineering articles about negotiating severance packages and the contact information for her friend in HR. The next day, she dropped off a homemade lasagna at my apartment, so you don't have to worry about cooking while you're focused on the job search. The contrast between her response and everyone else's was stark and painful. Rachel, who had no obligation to me beyond friendship, had offered more genuine support than my own family. She had given not just financial help, but emotional support, practical assistance, and her time without expectation of return. As I added her to my mental list of people who had passed my test, I realized something uncomfortable. It was a very short list. Just my grandmother, Martha, and Rachel. Everyone else had revealed themselves to be fair-weather friends at best and opportunistic acquaintances at worst. The experiment was proving more illuminating than I had anticipated, but the revelations were breaking my heart. 3 weeks into my experiment, I decided to escalate the scenario. So far, I had merely presented myself as temporarily unemployed, but optimistic. Now I would portray a more dire situation to see who would step up when things got truly difficult. I began by texting my family group chat, a forum usually reserved for birthday wishes and occasional holiday planning. Update on my situation, I wrote. Still no job offers. Savings almost gone. Might have to break my lease and find cheaper housing. Any leads or help would be appreciated. The responses were telling in their variety and timing. My mother replied, "First, have you tried cutting out unnecessary expenses? Coffee shops? Eating out streaming services? No offer of help. Just more criticism thinly veiled as advice." My father did not respond for 5 hours, then simply wrote, "Hang in there, son. Something will turn up." The digital equivalent of a pat on the back before walking away. Gregory, my successful brother, chimed in with what he clearly thought was a generous offer. "If you are willing to relocate to Atlanta, I might be able to find you something entry-level at my company. Would mean a pay cut from your last job, though." The offer came with an implied criticism, a reminder that I would be starting at the bottom while he remained at the top. It was not support. It was an opportunity for him to feel superior. Natalie did not respond to the group chat at all. When I texted her directly the next day, I received a terse reply. "Super busy with a product launch. We'll call soon." She never did. A week later, I noticed she had posted photos of a weekend spa getaway on social media, her busy schedule, apparently accommodating luxury but not family crisis. I tried calling my mother a few days later, escalating my story further. "Mom, I am really struggling here," I said, intentionally letting my voice crack with emotion. "The landlord is threatening eviction if I cannot pay next week. I have applied to over 50 jobs with no offers. I do not know what to do." Her response was swift and harsh. "Henry, I raised you to be more responsible than this. Your sister managed to build an emergency fund. Your brother created his own success. Why haven't you done the same?" "I did have savings," I protested. "But between rent, utilities, student loans, and food, it goes quickly." "Well, you know your stepfather and I are on a fixed income, now that he is semi-retired." She said, a statement that was patently untrue, given their recent purchase of a vacation condo. "We simply do not have extra to spare. Have you considered moving to a shelter temporarily? Sometimes you need to hit rock bottom before you can rebuild." I was stunned into silence. My own mother was suggesting I consider homelessness rather than offering even minimal help. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling numb. The experiment was revealing truths I had not been prepared to face. I decided to push even further. I crafted a careful lie about having to go to the emergency room for stress-induced chest pains, only to discover my health insurance had already lapsed. I sent this update to family and friends, implying significant medical debt on top of my existing financial problems. The responses were a study in human nature. My father called sounding genuinely concerned, but the call lasted less than 5 minutes and ended without any offer of assistance. Gregory suggested I look into charity care programs. Natalie sent a text saying, "OMG, that is awful. Feel better soon," with a heart emoji as if I had a mild cold rather than a supposed health and financial crisis. When I did not hear from my grandmother for 2 days after my health scare announcement, I grew concerned. I called her apartment with no answer. Then her neighbor, Mrs. Keller, who informed me Martha had taken a bus to Boston the moment she heard I was ill. She had tried to reach my apartment, but finding no one home, since I had not actually been in the hospital, had checked into a nearby hotel to try again the next day. Filled with guilt, I rushed to the hotel, where I found her in the lobby, clearly exhausted, but determined. When she saw me, her face lit up with relief. "Henry, you are all right. I went to your apartment, but no one answered. I was about to call the hospitals." The realization that my 76-year-old grandmother had traveled alone to another city despite her arthritis and heart condition to be at my side made me question the entire experiment. I had not anticipated this level of sacrifice and was not prepared for the wave of shame that came with it. "I am fine, Grandma," I assured her, helping her to a seat. "It was just a scare, nothing serious. You should not have traveled all this way." "Nonsense," she said firmly. "You needed help. Where else would I be?" I took her to dinner and then drove her home, promising repeatedly that I was okay. The entire episode left me shaken and questioning the morality of my test. Rachel's response to my health crisis was similarly devoted, but more practical. She called immediately after receiving my text, and when I did not answer, I was driving to see my grandmother. She left a voicemail, saying she was on her way to the hospital to find me. I quickly texted her that I had been released and was resting at home. Within 2 hours, she was at my door with groceries, over-the-counter pain relievers, and printouts about medical bill assistance programs. She had also researched free clinics in the area and brought information about applying for emergency Medicaid. "You should not be alone right now," she insisted, setting up camp on my couch, despite my protests. "What if your symptoms come back? Someone needs to be here." She stayed the night in my living room, checking on me periodically as if I really had been ill. In the morning, she made breakfast and left only after extracting a promise that I would call immediately if I felt unwell again. The culmination of my experiment came the following weekend. I sent out invitations to what I called a goodbye dinner at a modestly priced restaurant, explaining that I had decided to give up my apartment and move to a shared living situation in a less expensive part of the city. I presented it as both a farewell and a request for help with the moving process. Of the 15 people invited, including family only, 2 showed up: my grandmother, Martha, and Rachel. They arrived separately but immediately bonded Martha, complimenting Rachel's choice of sweater, Rachel helping Martha navigate the steps into the restaurant. As we sat at a table meant for many more people, the empty chairs spoke volumes. My test had reached its conclusion and the results were undeniable. Out of all the people in my life, only 2 had demonstrated unconditional care and support. Looking at them across the table, engaged in warm conversation, as if they had known each other for years, I made my decision. It was time to end the experiment and reveal the truth, at least to the 2 people who had earned that honesty. The question now was how they would react to learning they had been tested, and whether they would understand why I had felt compelled to do it. The decision to reveal my lottery win to Martha and Rachel weighed heavily on me. Would they feel manipulated, betrayed? Would the very experiment that had proven their loyalty end up destroying it? These questions plagued me as I finished my goodbye dinner with the only 2 people who had stood by me. I waited until we had finished our meal, not wanting to disrupt the warm atmosphere that had developed. Martha and Rachel had taken to each other, immediately sharing stories and laughing like old friends. It made what I was about to do even more difficult. "I need to tell you both something important," I said, as the waiter cleared our dessert plates. "Something that might be hard to hear." They both looked at me with such genuine concern that I almost lost my nerve. Martha reached over and patted my hand encouragingly. "Whatever it is, Henry, we are here for you," she said. That simple statement, so earnest and unconditional, made my throat tight with emotion. I took a deep breath and began. "I have not been entirely truthful with you. I did not lose my job. I am not in financial trouble. In fact, quite the opposite." I paused, gathering courage. 6 weeks ago, I won the lottery. $47 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Martha's hand froze on mine. Rachel's eyes widened in shock. I decided not to tell anyone right away. I continued, words tumbling out now. I had read about how winning the lottery can change relationships, how people come out of the woodwork wanting money. So I decided to test the people in my life, to see who would help me when they thought I had nothing to offer in return. I explained the entire experiment, from the initial fake job loss to the fabricated health scare. As I spoke, I watched their expressions carefully, looking for signs of anger or betrayal. Martha was the first to respond, her aged face a complex mixture of emotions. "Oh, Henry," she sighed, her voice heavy with disappointment. "Was all this deception really necessary? Could you not have trusted us?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Had I gone too far? Had my desire to protect myself turned me into someone manipulative and untrusting? I wanted to know who truly cared about me, I tried to explain, not about what I could give them. And now you know, Martha said simply. But at what cost to your integrity? Rachel had remained silent, her gaze fixed on the tablecloth. When she finally looked up, her eyes were damp with unshed tears. I understand why you did it, she said quietly. I really do. Finding out who's real in your life, that is valuable information. She paused, collecting her thoughts. But it hurts to think you did not trust me enough to just be honest. That you felt you needed to trick me to test my friendship. Her words made me realize something I had not fully considered. My experiment had revealed the character of others. Yes, but it had also revealed something about my own. In my desire to protect myself from false relationships, I had created false pretenses. There was a certain hypocrisy in that I had not fully acknowledged until now. I am sorry, I said, meaning it deeply. I never meant to hurt either of you. You were the only ones who passed the test. The only ones who showed they cared about me, not what I could give them. Martha's expression softened slightly. And what about the others? Your parents? Your siblings? What happens with them now? It was a question I had been wrestling with myself. I do not know, I admitted. I cannot forget how they treated me when they thought I needed help. But they are still my family. People are complicated, Martha said gently. They can be selfish and short-sighted, but that does not mean they do not love you in their own way. Rachel nodded in agreement. What they did was disappointing, but now you have a choice about how to move forward. Will you punish them, cut them out, or find a way to accept them as they are flaws and all? These were profound questions, ones I did not have immediate answers for. We sat in thoughtful silence for a moment before I steered the conversation to more practical matters. I want to take care of you, Grandma, I said, turning to Martha. I want to buy you a house, set up accounts for your medical care, make sure you never have to worry about money again. Martha looked torn between pride and gratitude. That is very generous, Henry. But I do not need a mansion or anything extravagant. Just a comfortable place, I assured her. Something without stairs, with a garden for your tomatoes. Whatever would make you happy. She smiled, tears gathering in her eyes. What would make me happiest is knowing you are using this blessing wisely. Money can change a person, Henry. Make sure it changes you for the better. I turned to Rachel next. And you? I want to repay your kindness. The $2,000 you offered me when you thought I needed it, that was so generous. I want to do something for you in return. Rachel shook her head firmly. I do not want your money, Henry. That is not why I helped you. I know that, I said quickly. That is exactly why I want to help you. Not because you expect it, but because you deserve it. She considered this for a moment. There is one thing, she said hesitantly. The youth center where I work is always struggling for funding. We had to cut the after-school program last month. If you wanted to donate there, it would help a lot of kids who really need it. Her selflessness only confirmed what I already knew about her character. Consider it done. I promised. And anything else you need, you only have to ask. As our conversation continued, we began to plan for the future. I would help Martha find a new home close to her friends, but with all the amenities she needed for her comfort. I would set up a foundation to support causes, like Rachel's youth center, and I would need to decide how to handle my family. Will you tell them about the lottery? Rachel asked, as we prepared to leave the restaurant. Eventually, I said, but not right away. First, I want to figure out who I am with this money, what kind of life I want to build. Then I will decide how they fit into it. As I helped Martha with her coat, she fixed me with a penetrating look. Just remember, Henry, the test is over now. Whatever you do next should come from a place of love, not resentment. That is the only way forward that will bring you peace. I nodded, absorbing her wisdom, as I had so many times throughout my life. I will try, Grandma. I promise. We left the restaurant together, the three of us, united by a shared secret and a deeper understanding of what truly mattered in relationships. I had set out to test others, but in the process, I had discovered important truths about myself as well. Now came the harder part, deciding what kind of wealthy person I wanted to be, and how to use this unexpected fortune to build a life of meaning rather than just luxury. 6 months have passed since I revealed my lottery win to Martha and Rachel. My life has transformed in ways both expected and surprising, but I have tried to maintain a core of authenticity throughout the changes. The first major change was Martha's new home. We found a beautiful single-story house in Cambridge, not far from her old apartment, but with all the amenities she needed: a spacious garden for her beloved tomatoes and herbs, wide doorways to accommodate her walker on bad arthritis, Daisy, state-of-the-art kitchen, despite her protests that it was too fancy for an old woman like me. The joy on her face when she first walked through the door made every penny worthwhile. I also set up a comprehensive healthcare fund for her, ensuring she would have the best medical care available for the rest of her life. Her arthritis treatments have improved significantly, with access to specialists she could never have afforded before. Last week she baked cookies without pain for the first time in years. A small miracle that brought tears to both our eyes. Rachel and I have grown closer, our relationship evolving in unexpected ways. What began as friendship deepened into something more meaningful after the truth came out. Initially, I worried she might see me differently because of my wealth, but she has remained refreshingly unimpressed by material things. When I tried to buy her an expensive watch for her birthday, she returned it and asked for a homemade dinner instead. True to my word, I established a substantial endowment for her youth center. The after-school program has not only been reinstated, but expanded. Last month I visited anonymously as a volunteer, and watched as teenagers learned coding, music production, and financial literacy in spaces that had previously been empty due to budget constraints. Seeing the direct impact of my money used meaningfully has been one of the greatest joys of my newfound wealth. As for my family, my approach has been more measured. I did not immediately reveal my lottery win to them. Instead, I simply told them I had found a new job with better pay. My mother expressed perfunctory congratulations before changing the subject to Natalie's recent promotion. My father sent a thumbs-up emoji. Gregory asked if my new salary was finally in the six figures, his tone suggesting even that would be a modest accomplishment compared to his own success. I maintain polite but distant relationships with them all. I call on birthdays and holidays, exchange pleasant but superficial updates, and decline most invitations to family gatherings with the excuse of work commitments. It is a cordial detachment that protects my emotional well-being while acknowledging the blood ties that connect us. I have not entirely written them off. As Martha wisely advised, I am trying to approach them from a place of understanding rather than resentment. People are complex, their capacity for compassion often limited by their own fears and insecurities. My parents came from a generation that equated financial struggle with moral failure. My siblings were raised in the same environment, absorbing those values. Understanding this does not excuse their behavior, but it helps me contextualize it. I have made one concession to family obligations. I anonymously paid off my sister Natalie's student loans through a third-party service that purchases and forgives debt. She does not know it was me. Perhaps she never will. But knowing she has that burden lifted gives me a sense of peace that transcends our complicated relationship. As for my personal life, I have maintained a lower profile than most lottery winners. I still live in Boston, though I upgraded to a comfortable but not ostentatious condo in a secure building. I drive a new car, but not a flashy sports model that would draw attention. I have indulged in some luxuries, like first-class travel and custom suits, but try to remember that these things are privileges to be appreciated, not entitlements to be expected. I have not returned to traditional employment. Instead, I established a small venture capital fund focused on startups, addressing social issues like affordable housing, educational access, and environmental sustainability. It allows me to use my technical background while supporting innovations that might genuinely improve lives. The work is engaging and purposeful, giving my days structure without the stress of my previous corporate job. Most importantly, I have maintained my anonymity as a lottery winner. Outside of Martha, Rachel, and the necessary financial and legal professionals, no one knows about my windfall. This has allowed me to form new relationships based on genuine connection rather than financial interest. I have learned that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in relationships built on authentic caring. The money sitting in my accounts is simply a resource, a tool that can be wielded for good or ill. The real treasure in my life is knowing that Martha would have given me her last dollar if I needed it, that Rachel would sit by my hospital bed without expectation of repayment, that there are people who value me for who I am rather than what I can provide. Perhaps the most profound lesson has been about forgiveness both of others and myself. I have had to forgive my family for failing my test, recognizing that their limitations are not necessarily reflections of their love for me, but of their own complicated relationships with money and success. I have had to forgive myself for the deception, acknowledging that while my intentions were understandable, my methods were sometimes questionable. This journey has transformed me in ways I never anticipated when I first saw those matching numbers on my lottery ticket. I am more discerning about who I allow into my inner circle, more appreciative of genuine kindness, when I encounter it, more intentional about how I use my resources to create meaning rather than just accumulate possessions. Last month, Martha, Rachel, and I took a trip to the Maine coastline, staying in a rented cottage overlooking the Atlantic. One evening, as we watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Martha turned to me with a serene smile. "Are you happy, Henry?" she asked simply. I considered the question carefully before answering. "Yes," I said finally. "Not because of the money, but because I know what matters now, and who matters." She nodded, satisfied, and returned her gaze to the horizon. In that moment, I realized that the true windfall in my life had nothing to do with the lottery ticket I purchased on a random Friday evening. The real prize was the clarity it had brought, the wisdom to recognize that genuine wealth lies in being truly known and loved by a few, rather than superficially accepted by many. The experiment that began as a test of others had ultimately become a profound education for me. And for that lesson, I am grateful beyond measure. What would you do if you suddenly came into a large sum of money? Would you tell everyone, or keep it private? Would you test your loved ones, or trust them implicitly? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences, and share this video with someone who might need a reminder about what truly matters in life. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the greatest wealth comes in forms that cannot be deposited in any bank.